Welcome into another playoff edition of Daily Faceoff Live. The show is a presentation of Bet365. Download the app, use the code NATION, and get in on the action. Today, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Tyler Yaremchuk, Frank Seravalli with you. Frank, how are you doing on a nice Tuesday?
I'm good. Yeah, just more playoff action. 2 games last night that were kind of never really in question. So we were missing out on some late third period or OT heroics, which is kind of nice for a change to, I guess, if you're a fan of those teams, but also to just kind of keep the blood pressure down on the couch.
Yeah, it's not bad. And for the people who are obviously watching the games like you in the Eastern time zone, a little bit of an earlier night. That's good to have every once in a while in the playoffs. Just one game on the schedule tonight. We're going to talk about Stars and Jets with Brien Rea in our big segment. We're going to talk a lot of playoffs. But first, Frank, some off-ice news as first reported by Rod Peterson of The Rod Peterson Show. Ken Holland is going Hollywood. Frank, some people just aren't wired for retirement.
Yeah, I think back to my last conversation with Ken Holland. I ran into him in December at the Board of Governors meeting, and he was working in NHL hockey ops, spending time in the situation room and assisting the hockey ops department with any of their queries or questions. And I said to him, hey, like, how are things going? Could you foresee yourself jumping back in? And he said, I'm not sure that I enjoy a stress-free existence. That's a direct quote. And that's someone who has been in the big chair for this year was the first season, the first time after 27 consecutive seasons, his name etched on the Stanley Cup 4 times, very, very close to becoming a 5th and the second, or I guess the first with a second team with the Edmonton Oilers getting to Game 7 in the Stanley Cup final last year. So an impeccable record, someone that has, certainly accomplished just about everything that you could, inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, and someone that doesn't like sitting on the sidelines. So the LA Kings, after making the change, moving on from Rob Blake, set to announce in relatively short order here that Ken Holland is their next GM.
A couple of questions to get to in terms of the task at hand for Ken Holland, but looking ahead to this summer, Frank, they got $23 million in cap space. They got a couple of free agents they need to take care of, but any sort of idea that this was going to be a Kings team that would maybe take a step back and say, okay, do we need to reassess how we're building? Do we need to retool? My feel is you don't hire Ken Holland if you're going to do that, right? You hire Ken Holland if you're trying to take that next step and become a Stanley Cup contender sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and just a reminder with Ken Holland, as you would know from Edmonton, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen in year 1 that he's at the helm. It's going to be a build that's going to take probably a little bit of time to add and continue to accumulate some pieces. But you're right. I don't think this is a situation where, hey, they're going to be trying to tear it down or go in the rebuild direction again. They already did that. They got Quentin Byfield and Brant Clark and Spence and that group of players that are from that era. They missed on a lot of draft picks, to be honest, which is part of the reason why the Kings are where they are. But look, there's still important decisions to be made. I think Andrei Kuzmenko is a really interesting one, a guy that really came in and fit that power play. And then, Tyler, of course, the next question is, who's going to be your head coach? Is it going to be Jim Hiller? Are you going to retain him? Or does Ken Holland look to bring in someone that is more familiar? Because that's also been one of the MOs of his career, is that he brings in someone that he has a connection to from somewhere.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. Obviously, the Hiller decision. How would you handicap it right now? Do you have a feel on maybe what direction they'll go?
I would guess that they're going to be changing coaches. I just think even for this core of players to come back after some of the decision-making in the first round and the style, the way that they played, I think that there's some tough things for Jim Hiller to overcome. And not only that, but a new GM just makes it kind of a seamless transition, the GM bringing in his own guy.
Yeah, and again, it's also one of those things, not Walking Dead or whatever, but when it is a coach from an old regime, it's just always that lingering storyline. As soon as there's any amount of struggles or the team goes on a losing streak, it's like, oh, well, he's not his guy. He's not his guy. So I think it's smart for teams to just kind of nip that in the bud real quick. Do you think, again, the $23 million, like let's say they bring back Gavrikov for whatever, even if you bring back Kuzmenko, like they have room if they want to go make a big splash on the free agent front. Do you think we'll see a summer where Ken Holland wants to put his stamp on things quick and spend a lot of money? Or do you think, again, it'll be more of a feel it out in year 1 and then maybe get more aggressive down the line?
I think it's probably going to be a blend of both. I think you're probably going to see some aggression. You're going to see a team that wants to take a step forward, but you're also going to see a team that wants to try and do it in a measured way. If you have cap space, I think Ken Holland had just operated in an environment in Edmonton where obviously in a flat cap world, money was very difficult to come by, and it made that decision-making process very difficult in season and limited some options. You can always get around it, but I think now having the benefit of some foresight would probably be really beneficial to take your time and do it right.
The LA Kings trying to finally get over the mountain that is the Edmonton Oilers and the first round of the playoffs. So they hired the guy who built those Oilers teams. And I love in our chat, Frank, everyone's making the connection. Do you just do the Thanos thing and you get Jay Woodcroft and you assemble a super team of ex-Oilers employees who could take down Edmonton?
Hey, you've already got Warren Fogle. I mean, that's a good starting point.
Yeah. Let's talk about those Edmonton Oilers, Frank, and dig into the Stanley Cup playoffs. It was quite honestly a dominant victory for the Oilers on home ice after the heartbreaker in Game 3 for the Rogers Place faithful. They were on their feet 3 times in Game 4. Adam Henrique scores twice. Evander Kane with just a monster performance, but Stuart Skinner with a 23-save shutout, Frank. That was just check, 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 check in terms of everything you'd want to see from an Oilers perspective.
Yeah, and how about that first period too? Just a little bit of everything that you could want as a hockey fan. Certainly the aggression, the physicality, everything that goes with it. And I thought the other sort of, we can talk about Skinner in a second, but the other sort of underlying story from Game 4 was really just that the Oilers seemed to find all the right notes under Chris Knobloch. I mean, think about all the lineup changes that were made prior to Game 4. You change up your lines, you throw Podkolzin and Kapanen around Draisaitl. Kapanen obviously returning, and look, this team looked better balanced than they had at other points. And Draisaitl goes toe to toe with Eichel. Both of those guys, Eichel and Draisaitl, were on my Selke ballot this year. And look, it was a textbook and much needed strong performance from Leon Draisaitl after a pretty tough look in Game 3. And not just talking about the last second goal either.
Yeah, no, he was kind of center frame on a couple of the other ones that the Golden Knights had in the loss in Game 3. So it was a bounce back on every front. I'll absolutely give Chris Knobloch some flowers here. He talked about wanting to inject more speed and really hurt the Golden Knights' ability to transition out of their zone. And I mean, first shift, Kasperi Kapanen goes and just hammers 3 Golden Knights. Like, he was flying. The physicality was there. He didn't look like a guy who had been sitting on the sidelines for the better part of a month. And the other change that I think really, really worked in Edmonton's favor was they put Troy Stecher in. And I talked about this morning with the Morning Cup of Hockey guys, but a lot of things in Edmonton don't make sense. Needing your $750,000 defenseman to be the whisperer for your $9.25 million defenseman doesn't quite compute, but man, they played more together Nurse spent more time with Troy Stecher than any other Oiler this season at 5-on-5. And I thought that was one of Darnell Nurse's better games of the postseason because he had his little pit bull Troy Stecher out there with him. Every change Knobloch made worked perfectly.
Yeah, it did. And I would say Troy Stecher, the first word that I think of when I hear his name is pro. Just a pro. He doesn't matter what he's being paid, what his contract status is, how long he sits out, gets in the lineup and does his job.
Yeah, Stuart Skinner. It was kind of funny just to read some of the narratives that Oilers fans had going into that game. There were people who were like, this is the biggest game of Stuart Skinner's career. And it's like, whoa, he started at Game 7 of the Stanley Cup final. We remember that. But there was pressure on Skinner last night. And I mean, listen, 23 shots, it's not a lot. But I look back at that hurdle breakaway he stopped in the first period when it was only 1-0. Those 3 power plays the Golden Knights had where they put some rubber towards him. I mean, he turned it all aside. He gets full marks for that effort last night.
Honestly, there was pressure on the whole Oilers team. I mean, think about the way the Game 3 ended in spectacularly bad fashion. They were that close to having a shot to go up 3-0, and all of a sudden you flip Game 4 around and the Oilers are in big trouble heading back to Vegas tied 2-2. And so this was a massive rubber meets the road moment for Edmonton. Are we going to make life easy on ourselves? A team that rarely ever does that. We didn't see that in the first round. It was a roller coaster. We haven't seen that in recent years. Or are we going to get greedy? Are we going to put a skate to the throat of the Golden Knights, a team that has their own Stanley Cup pedigree? I mean, that's as good a sign, I think, that you're going to see from the Oilers, that I thought that was their most mature performance that we've seen from them over the last couple playoff runs.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go out east, Frank, where it was all Canes all night in Carolina. A 5-2 victory. Yes, I believe. Yeah, it was an empty netter at the end. And I know Washington made this really, really good push. Ovi scores on the power play. It's 3-2. You're thinking, are we going to get a miracle here? Is this series going to somehow end up tied? But Sean Walker, 3.5 minutes after Ovi scores, delivers the dagger. And it's a 3-1 series lead for the Canes. And it feels like it might as well be 3-0 at this point. It's just been absolute domination by Carolina.
It has been, and I think it's just been one team dictating and asserting their will on how this game and series should be played over the other. That's what it feels like. And yeah, things did get a little bit tense. But I think this 3-1 series lead on the scoreboard actually indicates how disparate this series has been to this point. I mean, even the game that the Caps won, the Canes were right there. So I think this is a Caps team that has scored at will all season long, has really hit a speed bump for the first time. And I feel like one of the big things that we see from them is they don't know what to do next. They don't know how to fight through and break through to get those next goals, to get the next opportunity, to be able to create more. And so that part, from Carolina's perspective, they've snuffed the life out of, removed the oxygen from a lot of what makes Washington so difficult to play against. And with that, they've found ways to be opportunistic and to just create some chances on their own. And I saw Rod Brindamore railed against the idea of the Canes being a shot volume team, but I mean, statistically, it's not wrong. But look, his point is well made. If you want to score, that's the only way to do it, is to get pucks on net.
Yeah, they have 329 shot attempts at all strengths through 4 games. I would say that is a shot volume team, just looking at the numbers. So it was funny to hear Brindamore say that.
Yeah, I don't understand the knock, shot volume merchants or whatever you want to call them. You need to shoot to win. The more pucks you put on the net, the more chances you have to go in. And I don't understand the knock or the narrative.
Yeah, they have an extra day off in that series, by the way, so things will shift back to Washington, but Game 5 does not go until Thursday. We're going to keep talking playoffs in a second, get set for the one game tonight between the Jets and Stars. But first, Frank, a little rating game here on a Tuesday for you. As you know, I give a take or a headline. You give me a rating, Frank. 1 being, Tyler, you're an idiot. Why'd you ask this? 10 being, it's a stone cold mortal lock. So let's go back to the GM search side of things, where the Islanders are still looking and going through the interview process. The Islanders will, like the Kings, go with an experienced GM, Frank. Where do you rate that on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would say that's probably a 9.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, look, they're in a spot where they had been looking to hire someone as president of hockey ops. I believe Ken Holland was offered that job, and I believe he turned it down. I believe he was in a position where, hey, this is just too far from home. He makes his home in BC. He's got a lot of his family in the Calgary area. Too far to get to New York. And so I think that was certainly part of the consideration. And now moving forward, what's the next step? We've heard the names Marc Bergevin, since he's obviously not getting the job in LA. And I think a really curious decision. He had been the guy in waiting there for 3 years. Why go in a different direction? Does that mean that Luc Robitaille is losing his grip on this organization as president of hockey ops if he's not promoting one of his close friends for the role? And then what happens with some other guys that have been in the post before? Jarmo Kekalainen, some other names that have been in the mix. I think those are going to be really interesting candidates.
Let's go from the GM search to the coaching search. Frank, still 6 vacancies across the NHL right now. I'm going to say one of these gets filled by Friday. 1 through 10, what do you give it?
I think we could have 3 of these filled by Friday. I think there's a lot happening, percolating behind the scenes. I think there's lots of teams that are starting to get a little bit antsy as the music begins to slow down. And Rick Tocchet is kind of the linchpin for the market. Once Rick Tocchet decides, I believe there's going to be some decisions made in very short order.
Yeah, as you dubbed him, the shot caller of the group of free agent coaches. Final one before we move on. Let's go back to the Stanley Cup playoffs. Anthony Stolarz did skate today for the Toronto Maple Leafs. No idea if he's going to be cleared or not in time for the end of this series, but I'll say, Frank, it's Joe Woll's Joe Woll's crease anyways. Tongue twister.
I'm going to say that's a 10. I think Anthony Stolarz has done nothing wrong. I think he had played really well to start. I think you look at game 4 from the Florida Panthers, and that could have easily been a 5-0 game. Joseph Woll has been excellent. I think his ceiling is higher than Anthony Stolarz in the long run. I think these guys at the very best are a coin flip. And I think with the way Woll is playing, there's no reason to make a change, even if Anthony Stolarz is 100% healthy. And I'd say 1 week later, it's probably a stretch after what seemed to be the potential of 2 separate concussions or head injuries, that there's no reason to rush him back either. Joe Woll is he's holding down the fort, so to speak, for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's not the reason why this series is 2-2. It's their inability to score, and particularly their top end players. So none of this is on their goaltending.
Yeah, and I love it. Like, again, it was a pretty nasty looking set of concussions or concussion, whatever you want to say. Like, even if he's cleared, it's a win-win to just say, you know what, maybe even just sit on the bench for a week here and get in your warm-up routine and all that and just make sure you're 110% ready to go. Again, Cats, Leafs, game 5 will go tomorrow. 1 game on tap tonight. It's Stars and Jets. Let's dig into that a little bit more with the All 32. It's brought to you by Charm Diamond Centers, proudly Canadian owned and operated since 1972 with more than 85 locations across the country through Charm and their sister brands. Check out their large selection of Canadian lab-grown diamonds and mined diamonds by visiting them online at charmdiamondcenters.com. Brien Rea covers the Dallas Stars for the Victory Plus Network. Brien, appreciate you giving us some time today as we get set for game 4 of this series. And actually, let's start with this, because it was an interesting couple of days in the Dallas sports area. If I would have told the Dallas sports fans 8 months ago that, hey, the faces of your city are going to be Mikko Rantanen and Cooper Flagg, they probably would have called me crazy.
Probably about as crazy as if you told Mikko Rantanen in January that he was going to be facing the Colorado Avalanche in a playoff series and he was going to be eliminating them from a playoff series. So, look, it's sports. Nothing is normal anymore, it feels like, in sports. So it has been an interesting 48 hours with what's going on here in the Metroplex, but hopefully it continues for the Stars of the win here tonight. That's certainly what the fan base is looking for.
Let me start with Mikko Rantanen here. It's obviously he's been the focal point of all the discussion, right? He's been producing a ton of the offense, but surely you don't just get 2 wins on the back of one player. So what else has been going right for the Dallas Stars so far in this series against the Jets?
Well, first of all, for Mikko Rantanen, he just cannot go a day without being approached by the media to talk about something in the playoffs. But it looks like Miro Heiskanen could make a return tonight, so Mikko Rantanen might finally get a reprieve from all the questions he's been asked. As good as he's been, I really do think it's the goaltending for the Dallas Stars. And it's easy to point at goaltending in a playoff series. It's so vital. But if you look at round 1 against Colorado, I thought as that series went along, Jake Ottinger was getting better as the series went longer. I thought Mackenzie Blackwood started well and wasn't bad, but I thought he plateaued as that series went longer. Now you look at the Winnipeg Jets series, and Dallas goes on the road. They steal game 1. Jake Ottinger had to be brilliant in that third period in order to get that game 1 win. You look at what happened last game, and the whole Connor Hellebuck on the road, Jets on the road narrative, that just continues to grow for now as these playoffs roll along. So Jake Ottinger had to be good for Dallas to get a home ice win after stealing home ice advantage. You're going to get Winnipeg's best game of this series because they do not want to be another team that falls behind 3-1. So Jake Ottinger will probably have to be even better tonight or possibly play his best game of the series so far if Dallas wants to get a 3-1 stranglehold. But I really do think for all the Mikko Rantanen spotlight that's gone on, Jake Ottinger has been as good as they could have asked for in these playoffs so far.
Yeah, Brian, no doubt Ottinger's been awesome. But as you mentioned, the storyline potentially shifting tonight for the Stars. Miro Heiskanen potentially making his return for the first time since January 28th. I mean, I know we've talked about it and said, haha, like the Dallas Stars are this successful, and they've been without far and away their best defenseman. It kind of feels like this is a long time coming for Heiskanen because he's been so active in the morning skate front and you've seen him out there. Yet now as he gets prepared to return, what do you think we can expect from him as he dives right into the deep end of the pool in round 2?
That's the $1 million question. And I wish I had a really, really succinct answer for you. I do think Peter DeBoer was I thought fairly honest as hockey coaches can avoid being during the playoffs, but he has said this entire time with all the activity Miro Heiskanen has had, it's not just about a player feeling better and coming back. You know, we're talking about a player that essentially had knee surgery. There's a number of boxes and personnel that need to sign off on a few different areas through a rehab and a recovery to get to this point. So I think that is why we've sort of seen the teaser, but we haven't had the payoff yet, is they want to approach this the right way. And this is your franchise cornerstone, and you have them for another 4 years under contract. So this isn't just about one playoff run or one playoff series with Miro Heiskanen. There is a bigger picture to be worked with here. That being said, his return, first of all, I think he's probably the best defensive defenseman on the Stars roster. Not the same style as, say, Esa Lindell, but he kills plays with his feet and his stick checking. And the Stars really have had one true puck-moving blue liner on their roster through these playoffs, and it's Thomas Harley. Miro Heiskanen becomes a second player that can do that. He can change plays with his feet, starting in his own zone, and he can kill plays with his feet in his own zone. So I really do wonder about zone entries for Winnipeg. Do those stop when Miro Heiskanen's on the ice, and especially at the blue line? Dallas activating breakouts, Dallas speed through the neutral zone. How much of that occurs for Dallas when Miro Heiskanen is on the ice if he does return here tonight? Those are all little areas of the game that I think he has a immediate impact in. The other big question mark for me that I have been wondering this whole time, I think Thomas Harley has been excellent quarterbacking the Stars' number one power play unit since Miro Heiskanen went down. And I think it has continued to build since Four Nations. And the Stars' power play has been really good for them in the playoffs. I think they're tied with Carolina for the most power play goals or best power play percentage, and that is primarily Thomas Harley quarterbacking your number one unit. Does Miro Heiskanen, if he returns tonight, return to that number one power play unit, or do you leave Thomas Harley in that spot that seems to be rolling along with some real momentum for you in these playoffs? Peter DeBoer does love to keep his units together and does not like to deviate a lot. We've seen that a lot here in Dallas. That's the biggest observation for me. If Miro Heiskanen comes back, is he on the power play, and where is he on the power play compared to Thomas Harley's positioning? I think that's a really interesting point for Dallas in terms of a question mark.
And I know he hasn't been out nearly as long as Gabe Landeskog, but is there anything that the Dallas Stars need to guard against when you're talking about a player of this magnitude? You're thinking big emotional lift, this centerpiece of your defense core returning. Do they take their foot off the gas? They saw it last round when Landeskog came back on home ice, and then the Stars, they were the ones who won that game and quieted down that building in a big way.
I think it's a fair point to bring up, Frank. I really do. And also there's the physical element. Look, if I'm the Winnipeg Jets and I've got a guy on the ice who hasn't played for 3.5 months and we're in round 2 of the playoffs, I'm going to welcome him into the playoffs the hard way. I don't want Miro Heiskanen to ease back into things. So I think there's a couple of elements there. I do wonder, it was an optional morning skate today. We did not get to see defensive pairings. We did not get to see line rushes. Where do you fit Miro Heiskanen into your lineup? So you could have a couple of players changing roles or changing where they slot in on the blue line with Miro Heiskanen's return. You have time on ice minutes that could be managed. Peter DeBoer said 11-7 is on the table if Miro Heiskanen comes back tonight. Now, if there's one area that I do think Dallas could not fall into that trap, let's just play the hypothetical game and say you go 11-7 to ease Miro Heiskanen in. You've already been double shifting Mikko Rantanen in this playoff series. So you don't really change a lot with your forward group if you're only going to dress 11 and add that extra defenseman. I do think there could be a small emotional lift that Dallas does need to be aware of, but I do also think this is a pretty veteran-heavy, scar tissue, veteran group, and Peter DeBoer has talked about the response and the way this team has managed the playoffs. I do think if that is a factor, maybe it's a period that it's a factor and not necessarily a full game.
I wanted to ask you just quickly before we let you go about Mikko Rantanen and double shifting him and the heavy workload. Like, I was looking at the numbers with one or both of Hintz and Rantanen on the ice at 5-on-5. They're outscoring the other team 10-4. With both of them off the ice, they're getting outscored 16-8. In this forward group, who needs to step up to kind of buck that trend and get some production? Just stop getting caved when those two big guns are out there.
Yeah, I thought I've said the name Matt Duchene when I've been asked about this a couple of times now, and it's not like Duchene, Sagan, and Marchment when they're on the ice together, they've been bad. But I just look at Matt Duchene had a quiet playoff last year. That's the longest he had ever gone in the playoffs in his career. And I think that motivated him into being the Stars' most consistent forward start to finish in the regular season, 80-point season, arguably the best or second best season of his career. I thought he was building into being a very productive player for Dallas in these playoffs. Now, teams may have looked at the scouting report and said, we're not going to let Duchene beat us. He's been their best forward all year, and he could be dealing with some of that. But I am surprised Matt Duchene has not had the numbers production that he's had this year. I thought there would be more. He's still making plays. He is still one of their effective play drivers, in terms of puck possession. But it does feel like Matt Duchene needs a goal to break the dam a little bit, similar to Mikko Rantanen needing that first goal in the Colorado series, which ultimately broke his dam. That's the guy that I think they need a little more from in terms of production.
Yeah, even if you kind of believe that the Rantanen production is like a tad unsustainable and it'll dip, if they can get guys like Duchene to step up, and it just won't even be an issue. Brien, appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this, and enjoy the rest of the series.
Same to you guys. Appreciate it.
Let's get to our daily Faceoff inbox question. Frank, we got one in earlier from Jay, who wanted to ask you about the Flyers and their offseason. He said, do you see them being aggressive this summer? And he even mentioned a name, maybe target someone like Marco Rossi.
Well, they definitely need a center. I can say that for certain. That would be interesting. And I do think that there's some real questions in Minnesota as they begin to dole out their dollars. Do they want to pay? Marco Rossi had a great year. Do you want to pay to keep him? Is he a guy that you're a believer in? We saw when it came time with Kevin Fiala previously, not a guy that they wanted to pay to keep. So they moved on and ended up being an unbelievable trade for them. So I think that's certainly on the table. And I think the first and most interesting part is what's going to happen with Rick Tocchet. I do think the Flyers are preparing a massive offer. Let's see how this all shakes out in the next couple of days.
Yeah, we never talked about it on the show, but Marco Rossi's year-end press conference had like some kind of weird, ominous lines in it about his future. So that was it's something to watch for sure. I know you've brought his name up even throughout the regular season on the DFO rundown. Let's get to our daily bets for today, brought to you by Bet365. Want to get in on the action for the Stanley Cup playoffs at Bet365? They got you from game props, player props, totals, and money line. You can even bet on futures like series winners and, of course, the Stanley Cup champion. Whatever your bet, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app, get in on the game. An official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs, must be 19 or older. One game on tap tonight. So I'm going with a little same gamer, Gabe Vilardi. His shot prop is plus 155 for him to get 3 or more shots. He's done it in 2 of the 3 games already. The net front guy on that Jets power play gets a lot of opportunities to, bang some rebounds on net and things like that. I also like the over, Frank. It's road Hellebuck, right? The over is an easy one.
I like this. This is a good same game parlay.
Plus 350 from our friends at Bet365. And to wrap up the show, Frank, a little bit of garbage time. Let's go to the World Hockey Championships where Sidney Crosby has to wear a neck guard. It's a double IHF event, and he's wearing the same iTech neck guard that he wore over 20 years ago in junior. Frank, that means Crosby's neck guard is older than his line mate, Macklin Celebrini.
Yeah, his neck guard is almost as old as you, it feels like. I can't imagine what that thing smells like, what the crust on that thing is like. But, I mean, full marks to Sid for actually knowing where that thing has been. That's like, how do you keep track of a neck guard from 20 years ago? That is someone who has just dialed in on every level. So, full marks to Sid. I mean, that's an insane piece of equipment that should go right to the Hall of Fame.
That's a great point. Like the moves from Rimouski to wherever his offseason home is, then to set up in Pittsburgh. Like you're telling me at no point Sidney Crosby looked at his junior neck guard and was like, I don't need this anymore. I can let it go. Like what else is in Sidney Crosby's house?
Well, I was going to say, what if he keeps it in his hockey bag and it's just at the bottom of it, like floating around with like crappy rolls of black tape? What else is in there? And I'm sure someone's cleaning it out on a regular basis, but just makes you wonder.
Yeah, it is. That's a good point. All right. That is a wrap on today's edition of the show. Tomorrow, we'll recap tonight's Stanley Cup playoff action. Stephen Ellis is going to join us as well. Everybody in the YouTube, great stuff. As always, more than 400 of you in there today. I think that's a high in the Stanley Cup playoffs. So leave a like before you go, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow, noon Eastern. What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you're going to want to hit the subscribe button to not miss any of our content. From daily live shows with Frank Seravalli to analysis from former NHLers to exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in the hockey world on Frankly Speaking. You're going to want to hit that subscribe button and stay up to date with everything going on in the hockey world.